Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
This is a follow-up, a second podcast about the Healthwell Foundation. I just want to let you know I have a really bad cold, so I do sound a little bit congested. Sorry about that. They have helped 90 different disease groups get funding for what is not covered by insurance. The Bonnell Foundation will refer people to Healthwell when the financial need is greater than what we can give, or if we don't cover a certain request for funds. Approximately 40 to 45% of the CF community is helped by Healthwell. Healthwell used to pay about $25 million each year for cystic fibrosis copays and therapeutics, but because of the lack of funding, or perhaps it's more correct to say that because there isn't increased funding to meet the increased need, this therapeutic program has been discontinued, but not indefinitely. Healthwell did close their CF treatment fund to new and enrolling patients, but we're going to talk about where that stands and if there is a future for people looking for help from Healthwell. There's a lot of fear since that happened in August, but the CF Vitamin and Supplement Fund is still going to remain open, and we will also answer some questions about that. How long will those funds last, do they anticipate? We also discussed the North American Cystic Fibrosis Conference in this podcast. Alan and I were both there. By the time this podcast airs, the NACFC had concluded. Just wanted you to know that when we make references to it in the podcast. And to explain more and answer questions is Alan Klein with Healthwell. He is the Chief Development Officer. And Alan Klein, thank you again for coming to talk to us about Healthwell and fill everyone in, because I know there's a lot of anxiety about it and what's going on because so many people did benefit from it. Explain to us, as the Chief Development Officer, what's happened. The grants are not available now, correct?
So the Cystic Fibrosis Treatments Fund at Healthwell is still operating. It's still helping patients who have received a grant, and everybody who gets a grant has 12 months to use it. However, because actually the donations that we received have not this year kept up with demand, the fund has closed to anybody who is trying to newly enroll or to re-enroll since late this summer. We're hopeful that new donors will step up, or past donors will step up to allow us to reopen the funds to everybody who wants another grant, or for new patients who have yet to receive a grant. For those folks who have a current grant in the treatments fund, their situation will be unchanged until that grant runs out. Absent of new funding, then they'll be in the same boat as everybody else who is trying to get into the fund currently.
And something we talked about back in August when we were talking about everything that was happening with Healthwell was I was fearful that we were going to get more people applying to us just because I didn't know if we could fulfill and meet those needs. And now I'm getting very concerned emails from social workers at clinics like, hey, this person can get Healthwell. And there is an uncertainty. I think it's wonderful that everybody that's on it, of course, their grant will hold them. But for now, I guess people have to wait to see what happens with the CF treatment into 2024.
I think so. I can't see the future for sure. But what I would say is I have a much higher degree of confidence that by the time December or mid to late December rolls around, there should be additional funding at the latest into our CF treatments fund.
That is good news. I hope it comes through. And I have to ask you, if it doesn't come through, that $25 million, will you get your corporate donors to pass it out to all of us? I mean, I am half serious. Well, actually, I'm 100% serious. Like, what if you can't do the programs again? What if you don't get more than 25 million? Would they, allocate it to all the CF foundations out there?
So I don't know, and I can't speak to what they're doing with the funding that they're currently not yet providing to Healthwell. Part of the issue is, for example, the fund, when we ran it earlier on, needed only maybe about $15 million during the course of a calendar year to stay open throughout the year. Because of increased costs of drugs and because the treatments are actually working, so people are staying alive longer, of course,
right?
It becomes more of a chronic condition, so the need for funding is greater. So now that need has gone from what was around $15 million to $25 million, but the donations that we've received are really under the older model, and so only covers about what we used to be able to get by with. So that is why the fund closed early this year. The donors kind of need to recognize that the landscape is a little bit different in the sense that treatments are working, they are more expensive. There are going to be more patients because it is more of a chronic condition now, which is all good news, but it's not good news that people can't afford that chronic treatment, right? So once they get to understand that landscape, I'm hoping that they budget a bigger line item for Healthwell and for the CF Treatments Fund at Healthwell.
And because there are better treatments, they're staying out of the hospital. So it is definitely saving insurance companies money and people who have co-pays for those long hospital stays that they normally had but are not having, if at all, or not very often.
Yeah, pharmaceutical companies in general, they take that into account when they figure out what to cost out or price their product. So if their product reduces hospital stays, they can make a very good argument that their product can be charged a higher amount. That being said, if the patient still can't afford it based on after their insurance has paid, it doesn't do anybody any good, especially for a product that's supposed to be taken on a routine basis. And all the products in the CF space are supposed to be taken routinely, not just once or twice a year.
And where are the big costs coming? Because I know there are many states, one of them being Michigan, where we are based, that has a secondary insurance. Vertex does have the GPS program that's helping. And then insurance companies, for the most part, are covering, most of the costs. So where are the costs coming from that you're experiencing when people apply for the grants?
So when people apply for grants at Healthwell for any fund, and we have in our history run over 90 different disease area funds, we pay in the final position. So whenever a insurance company pays, they'll pay first. Then if a patient can have access to a manufacturer discount or PAP program or coupon or copay or whatever, they'll pay second. And then we'll pay everything else. So the issue is the everything else part is usually not affordable for people who come to Healthwell for grant assistance. And that could be anywhere from just a few dollars to several thousands of dollars. And everybody's situation is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, if their out-of-pocket obligation is above what they can afford, or have them make a choice between paying for that or paying for rent, or paying for that or paying for food, that's really not an acceptable choice. So we are here to kind of pay that last part on behalf of the patient as a gift to the patient.
I wanted to ask you also about the vitamin program. I know when we talked in August, everything was staying fine with that program. Is that still the case?
So the vitamins and supplements program, we believe we have enough funding for the rest of this year. It is likely that we have enough funding for at least the majority of next year. And certainly we're working to get additional resources into that as well. So the average patient in the vitamins and supplements fund over the course of a 12-month grant needs about $600 to $610 or so. So that's certainly going to be helpful for people. That helps them with, on average, about $50 a month out of pocket that they would have to pay themselves. Whereas for comparison's sake, on the therapeutic side for CF, that number is in the thousands. So it's close to 2,000 or so. So that's at least one piece of good news for CF patients, that funding has stayed open, and I believe will continue to stay open as well into next year, and at least for a good part of next year, if not longer.
That is good to hear, because we were hearing, or there was concern that maybe that would go away as well, which would be a big loss to CF patients. Have you not experienced, you're helping, as you said, 90 different diseases. Are you not experiencing this in other diseases? I know everything's different and there are many different factors.
There are some diseases that we've had open for as continuously long as cystic fibrosis that are having issues staying open as well. It is interesting because Healthwell has had a record year for donations last year and including this year. But that being said, the donors who donate to Healthwell select to which disease area they donate to. It's an important distinction to know that is the case. Healthwell itself does not pick and choose the disease areas. The donors have the ability to pick and choose the disease areas for which they donate to, as long as Healthwell has an open fund for that disease. But we do have diseases that we've had open for quite some time. I've been at Healthwell for 8 years. Our hepatitis C fund, for example, which has been open for over 9 years straight without closing, is due to close sometime next week for the first time. And certainly cystic fibrosis, which had been open since about October of 2015, consecutively without ever closing. When that closed, that was the first time that it closed in the middle of 2023. So that was a run of almost 8 straight years without it being closed uninterrupted to patients. So it is cyclical. Most funds at Healthwell do open and close at least a couple times during the course of a year, if not more. But there are some funds that we counted on being open all the time, and we were used to having open all the time, such as CF, such as hepatitis C, that were kind of experiencing something new and different this particular year.
And really a wonderful group of generous people that you have. Is it hard to get the word to them where the need is, or are you not able to do that because they get to pick and choose where they want to go?
Well, so for each individual donor, and the vast majority of our funding comes from corporations, I'm allowed to give them, and I always give them, what Healthwell needs for a given calendar year to keep the fund open uninterrupted. So I present that information to them. They review that. They make a decision whether to donate at all and how much to donate. But they at least have that information. All the current and potential donors to any different disease area know exactly how much Healthwell needs in order to keep a fund open throughout an entire calendar year. So they make the election as to whether to donate, and if so, how much.
And how did Healthwell get started? And how did you come up with this and realize how big the need was to get going in this area?
Healthwell is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. When we started, it was started because there was no way for patients who were on Medicare insurance or governmental insurance to receive any kind of support at all after Medicare paid. It is not legal for manufacturers to assist Medicare patients with any copays or couponing or the like there. They can only help the people in the private insurance sector. So what the Department of Health and Human Services said is okay is if a corporation who wanted to help donated to an independent foundation such as Healthwell, for example, and then Healthwell could help patients on a first come, first served basis within different disease areas. So once that happened, different organizations started donating to organizations such as Healthwell. We started helping patients in different disease areas, and we're opening new disease areas each and every year for us to help patients.
Well, that is really exciting. And when you hopefully do and are able to help with the CF treatment program again, how is that going to work? because I would think everybody's going to be applying all at once when they hear that it's back open. Is it people that have been helped before that will get the first opportunity to, get another grant, or is it new people? How do you decide who you're going to help?
That is a great question. So what we do, because we want to promote continuity of care, when the fund reopens, it will reopen for a short period to re-enrollees only. Until and depends on the fund. Sometimes it's only a couple of days, sometimes it's a couple of weeks, where we just hold that initial opening for re-enrolling patients only before reopening the fund to all comers. So I would anticipate that would occur when the CF treatment funds reopens. And what I would suggest is that people go to Healthwell's website, sign up for what we call real-time fund alerts, so they can sign up for either an email and or a text alert or even a voicemail auto call to let them know that a fund has changed its status at Healthwell. So it's gone from closed to open, or open to close, or closed to re-enrolling only, or from re-enrolling only to open. And they'll get the same timely information as anybody else would without having to keep clicking on our website and keep getting refresh all the time. That would be my number one suggestion to people who would be interested and want to know the second it reopens.
And then I was going to ask you, what do I tell social workers who either we are able to help their patients or we're not, but it sounds like that's what I should tell them.
That is exactly right. If they haven't signed up for that already, that's great. Please do let them know of that resource. That would be step one. And then I would always say to anybody who's a patient advocate or a patient themselves, as you know, make yourself heard, and make yourself heard within the community. I certainly jump up and down and let potential donors know that there are patients out there that could be helped if they were kind enough to do so. The more people who are singing the same song that I am, I think the more effective it is and the louder it is. So I would really think that would be something that would be very effective if we all can do that en masse. And I expect to do just that next week at the NACFC meeting in Phoenix, where I'm going there personally to go from organization to organization and make sure they know that there's a need, make sure they know that there's a great compliant organization like Healthwell trying to run this on behalf of patients, and that patients are potentially suffering because they don't have this particular resource.
And I think a lot of patients have questions, so it is good that you will be there, because I think there is a lot of concern in addition to, advocating for funds. I think you're going to be, a lot of people will be coming up to you and asking you all the things that we've talked about in this podcast.
I wish they would. So I'm there as a representative on their behalf, to be quite honest. This is what Healthwell does. Healthwell is there to help patients not have to make a horrible decision between not taking their medications as prescribed or having to sacrifice some other basic life's necessity in order to do just that. So if they want to come by, we have a booth that's there. We will be staffing that booth. It'll be not only myself, but the president and CEO of Healthwell, as well as our chief operating officer, who we actually hired 7 years ago from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, who this fund is absolutely near and dear to him as well. So all three of us will be there, and please approach any one of us with any questions. We are there to answer questions from anybody who asks.
So you've seen a lot over the years in relation to insurance. Do you have enough expertise to talk about what you're seeing, what your concerns are as far as insurance coverage for people with rare diseases? Do you also advocate in that area, or is it strictly just trying to, stay with bringing in funds for the programs?
We certainly are. We're not professional lobbyists or advocators or anything like that. We're kind of sticking to our knitting when it comes to trying to just help patients. But when an insurance company tries to For example, there's something called the copay accumulator program. We argue vociferously on behalf of a patient and saying, no, you cannot apply that for a Healthwell grant because we are giving a gift to a patient. We are not a representative of a manufacturer at all. So everything that we give the patient should absolutely be able to be part of their deductible. So we do stuff like that on an individual basis on behalf of patients in general. What we don't do is kind of lobby on Capitol Hill or anything like that on behalf of one way or the other. But we certainly will be there standing arm in arm with patients when it comes to making sure that insurance companies or policies in general don't try to exclude them on purpose.
And that is so important in regard to copay accumulator. We're trying to get it discontinued, banned here in Michigan, but there's a lot of work to be done, and it's been successful in other states, but it's a slow go here. What else is important for people to know in regard to Healthwell? Is there anything that we haven't talked about as far as programs that people should be aware of or looking out for?
Yeah, so we basically are trying to also help with additional costs associated with other ancillary needs that patients will have. And we're trying to do it in a very thoughtful way. So we're not trying to be everything to everybody, but we are starting to help in addition to, programs such as the vitamins and supplements program. We're helping with some lab costs, occasionally travel costs, a lot of times, behavioral health costs, which are a big out-of-pocket cost for talk therapy there, anything that a patient might have to pay out of pocket there. So we're opening funds that are helpful for ancillary costs. We were just last month named as part of the official White House Cancer Moonshot program.
Wow.
So we are on their fact sheet and fact page there. So we are very proud to be recognized by the highest office in the land for what we do. And we have also made a commitment to help patients afford to participate in clinical trials as part of that, and to help with diversity, equity, and inclusion and underrepresentation in clinical trials, as well as helping also with caregivers. Caregivers for patients in a whole bunch of different therapeutic areas have a variety of costs that they have to bear in order to be a caregiver. So we are actually rolling out a pilot program that will be also even larger in 2024 on a couple different disease areas for caregivers. So we're trying to branch ourselves out a little bit to service the patient community as fully as we can. We're always going to be certainly tied down to the amount of donations and amount of money that we can program out, but we look to get that out. As soon as we get it in, we look to get it out as fast as humanly possible. And then I get to ask for more. So that's the never-ending cycle of goodness that I hope to, and we hope to at Healthwell create here so we can help patients.
Right. It is such a never-ending cycle of asking for donations. That pilot program sounds amazing. I just think back when my kids were young and I had to, both of them have CF, so I had to go part-time so I could stay with them in the hospital. Somebody had to stay with them. I wasn't going to leave them alone. And I think back to those times when all the financial sacrifices that are made. So how many diseases are you going to target, and how will this pilot program help parents?
Yeah, so we'll roll it out in one disease, and we're talking about that now. So I certainly don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of launching it, but we'll test drive it in one disease to make sure that we've thought of everything. We're trying to do it extremely thoughtfully. So, what expenses qualify as reimbursable? We want to make sure that speaks to the people who are caregivers and we're not leaving anything out. So we want to do that on a small scale before broadening it. And then we have made a commitment to the Cancer Moonshot program in the White House that we will expand that into cancer therapies before the end of 2024. And I expect that we will continue to do that on a broader scale as the months and years go by after that as well.
Well, it all sounds wonderful. And I feel so much better than before we started talking, because I was really worried for patients. And then, like I said, since social workers were now contacting me about concerns, but now I feel a lot better. I feel like there is a plan and there isn't necessarily an absolute end. There's still hope for the future, and it's comforting to find out how it will roll back out if you get the additional money that's needed to keep the CF treatment program alive. So thank you for that. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should talk about?
No, I think you asked some great questions. This does not have to be the end of our discussion. We can always certainly do an update as to how things are going at any time. And certainly reach out to anybody here at Healthwell if you have any questions. We have a general inbox that you could ask questions to that'll eventually get to me as well. support@healthwellfoundation.org. And if you have a question on your grants, grants@healthwellfoundation.org. Either one of those two will get to either somebody on the operations side to help answer any questions or somebody on the business side that'll certainly be able to address some questions as well.
And I think the really important thing is that you're transparent. I have never had a no from Healthwell about asking questions, and that is unusual because I have found that when there are challenges or issues, sometimes companies aren't willing to talk. So I just really applaud you for that because it's so important. People are concerned, and I just really am grateful and thankful for all the transparency and accessibility to you and Healthwell. I think you're doing really good things and you will continue to. And people are definitely rooting for you because they want these programs. So thanks for all that you and Healthwell are doing for people with cystic fibrosis and 89 other diseases.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support and happy to do anything we can to try and alleviate anybody's concerns along the way.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen, who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
All got worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris, Genentech, and Vertex. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.